Today, guys, I'm going to briefly talk about the stats and the ability of the Evolved Wizard, and then we're going to get into some gameplay of it. So this is a one-cycle evolution, which definitely sounds scary because we all know how broken the Evolved Bomber is as a one-cycle Evo. The stats, though, are the same of the actual Wizard. The ability, though, is a Fire Shield. It has 52% of the hit points of the Wizard itself, which is going to be enough to barely survive arrows. And when it explodes, when broken, it deals enough damage to kill minions. So the shield is going to be very resistant to small spells because Zap, Log, and Arrows are not enough to take it out because, as you guys can see, it has 371 hit points. The shield explosion does 231 damage, so it's going to be able to kill things like the Evolved Bats, the Spear Goblins, the minions like I already mentioned, and all the spirits. Alright, let's get into a couple games with the Evolved Wizard. So it is a one-cycle evolution, so my prediction is, and I think this is what most people think, is it's probably primarily going to be used inside of heavier decks because a lot of the one-cycle evolutions, especially the expensive ones we've seen, like the Evolved Barbarians and the Evolved Royal Recruits, are typically played in heavier decks. Now, of course, the cheaper ones like the Evolved Bomber, those are often used in cycle decks, but I do believe the Wizard tends to pair better in a lot of heavier decks, which is why game one we have a giant deck here. And in the second game, I'll show you guys a game with P.E.K.K.A. Ramrider where the Wizard might be decent in that too. Maybe it's going to end up replacing Ewiz in some decks, so it's kind of interesting to see what happens because I don't think the Evolved Wizard, it might not on paper look super broken, but because it's one cycle, it would be very difficult for it to be bad, especially because of how resilient it is to spells. Like, sure, the stats are the same, but there's so many times where before you would go for a fireball or a poison on top of the Wizard, and now you just simply are not able to do that. So a lot of times you might have to rely on a melee unit hopefully hitting the Wizard. So right there, the NATO NATO'd in the Evolved Wizard, but the P.E.K.K.A. didn't end up taking it out. So right there, the Evolved Wizard on the defensive end pretty much did nothing because the NATO isn't even enough to take out the shield anyway. So you can see it might be kind of situational, but look at that knockback on top of the Lumberjack there. That is definitely a massive interaction and definitely something to take note of because I think, most people focus on the fact that the shield breaking deals damage, but don't forget it pushes things back, and you saw it right there on the Lumberjack. So that's another thing you're going to have to be aware of when you're defending and you do not want whatever unit to retarget onto something else. Like you saw there, it retargeted onto the Giant when you want to take out that Wizard. So definitely be cautious of that. Now, the tower is low, so Ian definitely has a very high chance of making this a two-tower game, of course. So opposite lane pressure coming in here with the Evolved Knight and the Giant. Evolved Knight, of course, ended up getting a nerf in the last balance change, but as you can see here, definitely doesn't seem like it's going to be dead. It's going to be worse, don't get me wrong. Maybe it won't be a top 3 Evo anymore, but I do think that it is a little bit worse, but I think it's still going to be good, but only time will tell. The Evolved Wizard, though, I mean, of course, that's the main topic because that's the new trendy thing that just came out. I mean, I don't know what my prediction is as far as how good of an Evo it's going to be. I would find it hard to believe that it's going to be a top 3 Evo, especially because it's the Wizard, one of the worst cards in the game, going to one of the best simply because of an evolution would be very hard to believe, but I feel like only time will tell. Giant Mini P.E.K.K.A. here with a Rage. The Freeze, though, really coming in clutch, pretty much stopped everything, so not much coming out of that push over there. Evolved Wizard helping to defend, but I think the shield might actually come off here. Yeah, it did. So now it's just a regular Wizard. Remember, when the shield is off, it is literally just like the OG Wizard. There's nothing different about it, as intimidating as it might look because, it's got a different skin. Don't let that fool you. You can fireball it, poison it, pretty much do what you normally would do. And let's see. So this is kind of at this point anyone's game. Now the regular Wizard has to come down before the Evolved one is back in cycle on both sides. And I don't know, the Wizard is really OP against air. So if Lava Loon ends up being kind of decent, then Evolved Wizard, that is kind of very good for it because the Wizard and NATO combination is absolutely nuts as you have seen this game, especially when defending air cards or when there's just a lot of things clumped together. And wow, did you see that? The shield breaking, it did so much damage to everything. And the Evo Wizard is still alive, technically the regular Wizard now, and that is going to be a nice win over there. All right, getting into the second game here. So P.E.K.K.A. Ram Rider against Golem. I think these are two other decks where the Evolve Wizard is going to pair very, very well in, because again, I think it's just going to go well inside of beatdown decks, and the Evo Wizard is probably going to do very well against beatdown decks too. Like, for example, the Evolve Wizard will probably do very well against Golem because Wizard is an amazing counter to things like the Night Witch and just anything in general where it's baity cards and things along those lines. So that would be, you know, the regular Witch too, but not many people are using the regular Witch, to be fair, but it just came to mind because of the Night Witch. So Golem coming in here, P.E.K.K.A.'s going to take it out really easily. Very aggressive Golem, I have to say, especially early on in singles. So when you're running P.E.K.K.A., you definitely do like to see that. Although the P.E.K.K.A. did lose a lot of her health from that Wizard. That was pretty wild. So Ram Rider coming in here on the counter push. Defensive Pump. Whew. Defensive Pump is not something you want to be doing, that's for sure. That is typically a last resort, unless you're using it against an E-Giant. Against E-Giant, then it's actually going to be very, very beneficial, especially if both the towers are hitting it, because the pump is just going to tank for it for such a long time. But something like a Ram Rider, you definitely do not want to be using it on that, unless you're going to be losing half of your tower if you don't otherwise do it. And that might have been the case here if his rotation wasn't that good. So Barbell coming in here with the Baby Dragon, and even though the Dagger Duchess got a massive health nerf, I forgot if I already talked about this yet this video, I still think she might be the best tower troop. It's very difficult to say, but there's just so many interactions that are just significantly better when you have the Duchess, just because she melts things like instantly, you know, until she runs out of ammo. But until that point, she's just getting an absurd amount of value. So Evo Wizard probably not going to do very much here, so it kind of went to waste. And as you can see, the Duchess is an incredible counter to it, especially when its shield is off. But I think even when the shield is on, the Duchess is just going to be a great tool against it. You're really just going to have to distract it with something, and then the Duchess just is going to clean up the rest. So Evo Wizard coming in here, look at this. Golem Night Witch push should be dealt with very, very easily by this Wizard here. And see, this is what's really nice about the shield. Sometimes you'll have stuff like this happen, annoying things where it's like not all the bats are going on your tank. Some of them end up going towards the Wizard, but then when that shield breaks, it ends up protecting itself, and then, you know, it essentially has an extra life. So that is kind of what you saw right there. So there's just going to be so many nice little situations where that Wizard Evolved is just going to end up getting a little bit of value. I really don't think, I honestly have to say, I don't know about you guys watching so far from what you've seen from the first and second game here, but in my opinion, this might actually be one of the most potentially balanced Evos. This is by no means a bad evolution, but at the same time, to me at least, this doesn't seem like it's going to be one of the most broken evolutions. This, I feel like, is right around where it should be. And personally, I'm a fan of them doing evolutions like this. I really like the ones where they're not giving it a health increase or a damage increase, fire rate increase, all those things, because that makes it, I feel like, confusing to new players and casuals, because you have to learn a whole new set of interactions, and instead all you're seeing is just one ability to the card. So I am personally, you know, just a huge fan of that, and I think from this point onwards, they should keep adding evolutions like that. I forgot if they already mentioned, I think that might be what they're gonna keep on doing. So I'm glad they've kind of realized that, because some of the first few Evos we've had added to the games have just been, you know, completely out of hand clearly, which is why we had in the last balance change a massive Evo nerf situation. But Evolved Wizard getting a ton of value on the defensive end, and it still has its shield up. I mean, it's just really, when it's played on defense, there's not a whole lot you can do, because the spells are just not going to kill it. So you really just have to try to avoid feeding it and giving it a ton of value. So I wonder if it's the type of thing too where when someone goes for an Evolved Wizard, it's a really good opportunity to go opposite lane, because you know you can't play into it. So that's something we may see as well. Whereas before you could just spell it, but now that's not the case, and you're not really going to be able to play into it either, depending on what you're running. So this game here, pretty much a wrap. As you would expect, P.E.K.K.A Wizard definitely going to be a fairly good counter to Golem. So that's going to be about it for the video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you guys did end up enjoying it, and definitely let me know in the comments, what do you guys think of the Evolve Wizard? Definitely a pretty fun one, and it looks like it'll be pretty balanced in my opinion, but I guess only time will tell.